What would you do if your new neighbor moved in and immediately started stealing from you, right under your nose? I live in a quiet, middle-class neighborhood, the kind where people mow their lawns on Saturday mornings and kids ride their bikes in the cul-de-sac without a care in the world. My house isn't anything extravagant, but it's mine. A small, well-kept mid-century home with a neat little front yard and just enough space to feel comfortable. One of its quirks is that I share a narrow driveway with the rental house next door. For years, this wasn't a problem. The tenants before were considerate, and we worked things out easily, no drama, no issues. Then Madison and Tyler moved in. From the start, something felt off. Madison carried herself like she owned the place, even though she was just renting. She had this casual, dismissive way of looking at people, acknowledging them with a nod that somehow managed to feel like a brush-off. Tyler, her boyfriend, was quieter, almost invisible in comparison. If he wasn't following her around like a shadow, you'd forget he even existed. The first red flag was the car situation. Madison drove a brand new, flashy electric sports car that looked more suited for a celebrity than someone renting a modest suburban home. The moment she pulled into the shared driveway, it was clear that she had zero intention of respecting the space. She parked dead center, taking up far more than her fair share, leaving me to awkwardly maneuver my car around hers just to get in and out. I figured I'd give her a few days to settle in, hoping she'd realize and adjust. She didn't. But that was just the beginning. One evening, I pulled into my driveway and noticed something strange. Madison's car was plugged into an outdoor outlet on my house. At first, I thought maybe it was a mistake, maybe she had just needed a quick charge and would ask me later. But she didn't. She just helped herself. I stood there for a moment, staring at the thick charging cable snaking from my house to her car, my stomach tightening with a mix of confusion and disbelief. She never asked. Never even mentioned it. Just plugged in, like it was her right. I debated saying something right then and there, but I wanted to believe it was an accident. Maybe she didn't realize it was my power she was using. Maybe she'd unplug it after a few minutes. Except she didn't. That night, her car sat there for hours, siphoning my electricity while I sat inside, trying to wrap my head around the sheer audacity of it. By the time I woke up the next morning, she was gone, car fully charged, power bill on me. And just like that, my peaceful home wasn't so peaceful anymore. The next evening, I came home from work, hoping, foolishly, that Madison had gotten the message. Maybe she'd realized what she was doing was wrong. Maybe she'd respect the boundary and stop. But as I pulled into the driveway, my headlights swept across the same infuriating sight. There it was, her electric car, parked obnoxiously in the middle of the driveway, plugged into my outlet again. My stomach clenched. I gripped the steering wheel, trying to stay calm, but the sheer entitlement of it was unreal. She wasn't just borrowing power, she was stealing it, and worse, she acted like it was her right. I parked, got out, and marched up to her door, knocking harder than necessary. A few seconds later, it swung open, and there she stood, casually holding a glass of wine, looking utterly bored. "Oh. Hey," she said, like I was an unexpected delivery. I forced a breath through my nose. "Madison, your car is plugged into my house again." She took a sip of her wine, tilting her head. "Yeah?" I blinked. "Yeah?" That was her response. I squared my shoulders. "You didn't ask." "Again. I already told you I'm not comfortable with you using my electricity." She let out a small laugh, shaking her head as if I were a child throwing a tantrum. "It's just a charge. Relax. You're acting like I drained your bank account or something." "No," I said, voice tightening. "You're using something that doesn't belong to you. That's theft, Madison." She rolled her eyes, leaning against the doorframe. "Oh, come on. It's not like you even notice." "What is it?" a few extra dollars. You're really making a thing out of this? The absolute audacity. My patience snapped. Unplug it. Now. And don't do it again. She exhaled dramatically but didn't move. Instead, she took another sip of wine, looking me up and down like I was overreacting to my own property being stolen. Finally, with the grace of a queen granting a peasant's request, she sighed. Fine. If it means that much to you. She strolled outside, taking her sweet time, and unplugged her car with the slowest movements possible, making sure I knew just how much of a burden this was for her. She didn't apologize. Didn't acknowledge that she was in the wrong. Just pulled the plug, flicked her hair over her shoulder, and went back inside without another word. I stood there for a long moment, jaw clenched. I knew this wasn't over. And I was right. The next morning, I woke up to an official notice from the HOA taped to my door. My stomach dropped as I skimmed the letter. A formal complaint had been filed against me, not Madison. Me. The accusation? Harassing a fellow neighbor over personal disputes. I stared at the paper, rereading the words as a slow, simmering anger built in my chest. Madison had gone to the HOA first. She had flipped the script, making it seem like I was the problem, like I was bullying her over nothing. The most enraging part? The HOA believed her. I immediately called the HOA office, demanding an explanation. The woman on the phone gave me a polite but condescending response. Sir, we take all reports of neighborly disputes seriously. If you're having an issue, we encourage you to de-escalate the situation rather than antagonize others. De-escalate? She was stealing from me, and I was the one being told to de-escalate? I tried to argue, to explain what was actually happening, but they wouldn't hear it. If you continue causing issues, further action may be taken. I hung up, seething. Madison had played her hand brilliantly. Instead of owning up to what she did, she had weaponized the system against me. And now, if I pushed back, I'd be the one facing consequences. But I wasn't about to roll over. That evening, I took matters into my own hands. I went to the hardware store and bought a heavy-duty outlet lock. If Madison wanted to steal power, she was going to have to find a new victim. By the time I finished installing it, I felt a small, hard-won sense of satisfaction. Finally, I had taken back control. At least, I thought I had. The next morning, I woke up and noticed something off. My alarm clock was blinking, my Wi-Fi was down, and my fridge wasn't humming like usual. I checked my phone, no power outage reported. My stomach twisted with a bad feeling as I walked outside, heading toward the electrical panel. And then I saw it. My main breaker switch had been flipped. Someone had tampered with my power. I knew who it was. And I also knew this had just become something much bigger. I stood there in the early morning light, staring at the flipped breaker switch, my blood running cold. There was no doubt in my mind, Madison had done this, this wasn't some accident. This wasn't just her being inconsiderate. This was deliberate. I forced myself to take a breath, trying to stay calm. If I reacted emotionally, she'd win. I needed proof. I pulled out my phone, snapping pictures of the breaker box, the position of the switch, and the lock that was now missing from my outdoor outlet. That was all the confirmation I needed. Madison had retaliated for the outlet lock by cutting power to my house. I wasted no time. I called the HOA, again, when the receptionist picked up. I didn't even let her finish her greeting. This is Ethan. I need to file an official complaint against my neighbor. Someone has trespassed onto my property and tampered with my electrical panel. There was a pause. A long one. Then, in a voice that was far too neutral, she replied, "Sir, we already have a file regarding the disputes between you and Ms. Madison. I suggest you handle this between yourselves." handle it?" My voice was sharp, barely controlled. "You're telling me that a neighbor breaking into my power box and shutting off my electricity isn't your concern? Well, we can't prove who did it. She's the only person who had a reason to do this. And I have photos." Another pause. Then, finally, she sighed. "Sir, we'll schedule a board review and notify Ms. Madison about your concerns." I could hear it in her tone. They weren't going to do a damn thing. I hung up, fuming, and decided I wasn't going to sit around waiting for their useless process to play out. I called an electrician, explaining the situation. He arrived that evening and installed a new lock on the breaker panel, making sure it couldn't be tampered with again. He even suggested installing a security camera, something I should have done weeks ago. And I did. That night, I set up a motion-triggered camera aimed at my driveway and electrical box. If Madison tried anything again, I'd have her on tape. For the first time in days, I went to bed feeling a little more in control. Until the cops showed up at my door the next morning. I opened it to find two uniformed officers standing on my porch, looking serious. "Sir, we received a report that you've been harassing your neighbor, Ms. Madison. She's expressed concerns about feeling unsafe." I laughed, I couldn't help it. "You've got to be kidding me." The officers didn't look amused. "Would you mind answering a few questions?" I could see her watching from her window, a smug little smirk on her face. She had just weaponized the police against me. I knew how this worked. I kept my tone even. "Officers, I haven't harassed anyone. Madison has been stealing my electricity. I installed locks to stop her, and when that didn't work, she cut my power. I have pictures. I even have a security camera now. If she's feeling unsafe, it's probably because she knows she's been caught." That seemed to shift something. One of the officers glanced at the other. "Do you have footage of her trespassing?" "Not yet," I admitted, "but I have photos of the damage and proof of previous theft." The officer sighed, pulling out a notepad. "All right, let's get your statement." It took nearly an hour to explain everything, from the stolen electricity to the HOA siding with her, to her tampering with my power. The cops weren't happy about being dragged into what they called a neighbor dispute, but by the end, they gave me a warning, ***, not to engage with Madison directly, ***. You have a case for property interference, but unless we catch her in the act, there's not much we can do beyond filing a report. I clenched my jaw. She was getting away with it, again. The moment they left, my phone buzzed. An email from the HOA. I opened it, already bracing for what I knew was coming. "Dear Mr. Ethan. It has come to our attention that your ongoing disputes with Ms. Madison have escalated into a police matter. The HOA board would like to remind you that conflict resolution should be handled civilly and without legal intervention unless absolutely necessary. Continued hostility toward other residents may result in fines or further action. Sincerely, HOA Board of Directors." I wanted to throw my phone across the room. They were protecting her. Again, ***. Madison tried to steal from me. Tampered with my home. Called the cops on me, ***, and yet, somehow, I was the problem. But I wasn't done fighting. I took every bit of evidence I had, photos, emails, even the police report, and drove straight to a lawyer's office. Because if the HOA wouldn't hold Madison accountable, I'd make sure someone did. I sat across from my lawyer, Ms. Harper, watching as she skimmed through the stack of evidence I had brought, photos of Madison's car plugged into my outlet, the tampered breaker, the security footage of her sneaking around my property, and the HOA's infuriating emails blaming me for conflict. She didn't say much at first, just flipped through the documents with a practiced calmness. Finally, she set the papers down and folded her hands. "Ethan, this isn't just a case of a bad neighbor. This is systematic abuse. You have evidence of property interference, trespassing, harassment, and now a false police report. I exhaled, tension sitting heavy in my chest. So what do? We fight back. And fight back, I did. The first step was filing a formal cease and desist order against Madison, legally warning her to stay off my property and stop interfering with my utilities. Ms. Harper also sent a notice to the HOA, demanding a review of their handling of the situation, making it clear that their bias against me could open them up to legal consequences. Madison must have received her copy because the next morning, she was standing outside in the driveway, waiting. I ignored her at first, but then she spoke, loud enough for the neighbors to hear, Oh, come on, Ethan, this is getting ridiculous, she scoffed, arms crossed. A lawyer? Really? Over a little electricity? I clenched my jaw but didn't engage. That's exactly what she wanted. But then she took a step closer. Let me guess, she continued, voice dripping with mock sympathy. You couldn't handle losing, so you had to run and cry to a lawyer? I turned to face her fully, my patience long gone. No, Madison. I went to a lawyer because you stole from me. Tampered with my power. Lied to the HOA. And called the cops on me when you didn't get your way, this is me making sure you can't do it to someone else. Her smirk faltered just a little before she flipped her hair over her shoulder. You're pathetic. I smiled, but it wasn't friendly. See you in court. She stalked back into her house, slamming the door. But if she thought that was the end, she was dead wrong. The real war had just begun. A week later, Madison escalated things even further. I checked my mail one morning and found an envelope with her lawyer's name on it, my stomach twisted as I opened it, scanning the document. She had filed a lawsuit against me. The claims? Harassment. Defamation. Emotional distress, I laughed. Actually laughed. She had the nerve to accuse me of harassing her after everything she had done? It was so absurd it almost felt like a joke, except it wasn't. She was actually trying to drain me financially and force me to back down. But she didn't expect what came next. Ms. Harper filed a counter-lawsuit within 24 hours. Defamation. False police reports. Property interference. Abuse of legal processes, And just like that, Madison realized she had picked a fight with the wrong person. The HOA, sensing that they were now entangled in a legal nightmare, suddenly changed their tune. I got an email from the board requesting a mediation meeting to settle things peacefully. They weren't worried about Madison. They were worried about me suing them. But I wasn't going to let them sweep this under the rug. The day of mediation arrived, and I walked into the conference room to find Madison, her lawyer, and 2 HOA board members waiting. She sat back in her chair, arms crossed, as if she had already won. Ms. Harper and I took our seats, and the mediator, a calm, middle-aged man, cleared his throat. All right, let's try to find a resolution that works for both parties. Madison immediately leaned forward. Yeah, I'll make this easy. Ethan can just admit he overreacted, drop his little lawsuit, and we can move on. I stared at her. That's not happening. She scoffed. Seriously? You're going to drag this out over, what? A couple $100 in electricity? Ms. Harper interjected smoothly. Actually, we're suing for malicious property interference, false claims, and damages exceeding $10,000. Madison's face drained of color. The HOA board members shifted uncomfortably. It was clear they had only agreed to mediation because they thought they could pressure me into backing down. The mediator sighed. All right, let's work through this one issue at a time. Ethan, what would you need to drop the lawsuit? I kept my voice calm but firm. An admission of guilt from Madison, full reimbursement for the electricity she stole, and an acknowledgement from the HOA that they mishandled this entire situation. Madison laughed, shaking her head. No way. One of the HOA members cleared his throat. Ms. Madison, we do need to acknowledge that. Are you kidding me? She snapped. He's the one making this a huge deal. He's been spying on me, making my life hell. The mediator raised a hand. Ms. Madison, please keep this civil. But Madison wasn't listening anymore. She was unraveling. Her lawyer tried to calm her, but it was too late. She had exposed herself as the unreasonable one. By the end of the meeting, Madison had stormed out, slamming the door behind her. The HOA board, now desperate to cover themselves, offered me a written apology and agreed to change their policies on handling disputes. As for Madison, she had just sealed her own fate. The legal battle wasn't over yet, but she had just lost the one thing she counted on: control. A month after the mediation, the court ruling came in. Madison lost. The judge dismissed her frivolous harassment claims, citing lack of evidence and an obvious pattern of manipulation. My counter-lawsuit for defamation and property interference held weight, and while I wasn't expecting a massive payout, the court ordered her to cover my legal fees and reimburse me for the stolen electricity. But the real blow? Her landlord evicted her. It turns out, after the HOA's sudden shift in attitude, the property management company took notice. Between my official complaints, her legal troubles, and her tampering with a neighbor's electrical system, they decided she was too much of a liability. She had 60 days to vacate. The day she moved out, I watched from my porch as she loaded her ridiculous electric sports car for the last time. She didn't say a word to me. No final insult, no smug parting remark, just an angry scowl before she peeled out of the driveway, tires screeching. For the first time in months, I could breathe again. No stolen electricity. No HOA threats. No police knocking on my door. Just peace. Of course, the HOA tried one last petty move. A final notice appeared in my mailbox, citing me for creating neighborhood hostility, and warning that future complaints of an escalatory nature may result in additional review. Basically, a thinly veiled "don't mess with us" message. But at this point, I had one. I threw the letter straight into the trash. The neighborhood felt different after Madison left. Some of the same neighbors who had believed her lies started warming up to me again. The HOA was quieter, suddenly more responsive to actual issues. Even Tyler, who had ghosted me through the whole ordeal, sent me a quiet apology text. Looking back, this was never just about electricity. It was about entitlement, manipulation, and standing up to someone who thought they could walk all over me. Madison had tried to twist reality in her favor, but in the end, she lost because she underestimated me. I learned something, too. Sometimes, fighting back isn't about winning big, it's about refusing to be a victim. It's about proving that you won't just sit back and let people take what they want, no matter how small the theft, no matter how many rules they twist in their favor. So now I have to ask, have you ever dealt with an entitled neighbor, an HOA nightmare, or a Karen who thought the rules didn't apply to her? Drop your story below. I need to know I'm not the only one who's been through this insanity.